I'm on the Complete Weed Control stand and I'm with Ian Graham of Complete Weed Control and Daniel Jones of
Advanced Invasives.
Yeah. And there's some fantastic news out about glyphosate, as I understand it, based on a report that you've done, Dan. You did the report.
So the purpose of the report was to independently evaluate different weed control methods, and I think one of the issues that we've had around understanding sustainability is that it isn't just about the herbicides themselves, it's about the environmental impacts of the different weed control methods. So things like using hot water, steel brushes, they've got an impact on infrastructure, particularly steel brushes, and there's a lot of carbon associated with the production of brushes, with the heating of water, and we're really not accounting for that when we think about sustainability and environmental impacts. And I think the purpose of the report was to kind of demonstrate that what we've got in terms of glyphosate, in terms of its efficacy, relative safety, is really important, but also that the amount of carbon that's emitted during those kind of weed treatment processes is actually really low, and there's a lot of other environmental impacts that are low relative to some of the alternative methods that have been proposed to replace glyphosate.
It's fair to say that glyphosate has had a bad rap over the years, but this is showing that in the round, it's a safe and proper way to go.
And I think that's the thing. Like when we did work together on Japanese knotweed, we're not saying that there's no drawbacks or there's no problems with it. What we're saying is using it in the right time, the right place, at the right dose, using the right application equipment, we can get really good results. And particularly with things like Japanese knotweed, there's no magic bullet for it. So without that magic bullet, everything's got pros and cons, and you've got to work with, what's best and be led by the evidence.
Now, this report has obviously helped you, Ian. What were the issues before? The fact that you couldn't quite say.
I think it will help us, but more significantly, I think it will help local authorities and those who are getting asked the questions about why it is they're using glyphosate to achieve their aims. As you rightly say, glyphosate has had some bad press. But unfortunately, the science has always been strong. We work in a very regulated industry, and the people whose job it is to decide what we're allowed to use as practitioners do their job, and we do ours. Ours is to take the things that we're allowed to use and to make the best with them. So the Cardiff report is really interesting for councils because they're getting asked the question, why do you use glyphosate? Why don't you do something else? And the question has had an answer, which is, well, it's the best way to do it, and it's the way that we do it, and we're happy with it. But we didn't have any data. So now we can point at the data and say, okay, without question, we know that glyphosate, particularly when it's applied through a spot treatment machine such as we do, is the best way. And not just best way in terms of cost and results, but the environmental impacts, as Dan refers to, are very low by comparison. So now there is a very easy way of quantifying what it is that councils are doing and the impact that it's having, and saying, okay, this is why we're doing it.
What were the other methods that the glyphosate were judged against?
So we tested acetic acid, which is basically concentrated vinegar, and also a hot foam system. So the water's heated up to boiling point, and then there's a biodegradable foam within that helps to retain heat on the plants when it's applied to them. So those are the two kind of key methods that we tested in this particular trial. And I think quite uniquely, I don't know of any other studies that do a full environmental impact as we've done, but trialling them individually, so you've got everything being trialled and benchmarked in parallel. They're all being tested at the same time under the same conditions, so that we can see individually which of these treatments is most effective, most cost effective, and also all of the environmental impacts associated with that, so we can have a clear view of these different weed control methods in isolation.
When did the report come out, and what access have councils had to it so far? Is it fairly new, or is it out there yet?
In recent weeks, it's been published. I think 19th was the date when the publication was officially out there. So the councils are only really now just seeing the results from this, but many of them have been aware, and many of them have actually been doing their own trials, usually on a much smaller basis, to try and establish for themselves a data set. But I think that now this has been achieved, they don't need to do that. They can look and see a very comprehensive set of data to inform their future choices.
And I think in terms of the way that we've done the study, because it is a scientific study, if anybody's keen on replicating this or doing things, testing to see whether these results are as stark as we've found with our research, that possibility is available for them as well in terms of, reproducing those methods is absolutely possible with what we've written.
Now, from a council perspective, they'll be looking at cost. Is it the most cost-effective method or just the most effective method?
There are a lot of metrics that Dan's presentation will shed light on, but to directly answer your question, there is orders of magnitude in terms of cost difference between glyphosate applied properly and the alternatives.
Well, this looks like the sort of research that we should have more of in the industry, but it's great that you've done it, Daniel, and the fact that you're able to use it so effectively is good news.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth adding as well that glyphosate has had some pressure, but within the turf industry there are lots of different herbicides and products that we rely upon in order to create good playing surfaces. There is always going to be pressure on some of those things, and if we don't use data and science to demonstrate what's right and wrong, there's a good chance that we'll lose many of those going forward. So it's really important that we continue this journey and ensure that what we've got is something that we can use in the future by establishing the facts.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.